Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Cannabinoid Journal podcast. We are delighted to be joined now from the US by Dr. Ethan Russo, a board certified neurologist, psychopharmacology researcher, and, of course, author. Very well known for his interest in the entourage effect. Dr. Ethan Russo, please, thank you for joining us. First of all, could you tell us a little bit more about the entourage effect? Maybe explain it in a metaphor, if you could.
Sure. Well, I guess that you'd liken it to an orchestra where there'd be certain soloists, but it really doesn't have the resonance and impact that the full orchestra will with its harmony, counterpoint, and everything else. So this concept began in 1998. Professors Meshulam and Ben Shabbat in Israel introduced the concept of the entourage effect. Initially, they applied this to the endocannabinoid system. So these are the chemicals within us that help explain how THC and cannabis work. Specifically, there are two soloists there, if you will. These are called anandamide and 2-arachidonoglycerol, 2-AG for short. And what was noticed experimentally is that these had certain activities that were greatly bolstered or synergized, boosted by the availability of related compounds, which on their own seem to be relatively inactive. But together, in the entourage, the effects were greatly magnified. Now, the following year, in 1999, they said the same concept could apply to cannabis, because some plants are better drugs than the individual compounds derived from them. But they pointed out that at the time they thought this was theoretical more than something that was proven. However, we've had 22 years in the interim that really demonstrate the validity of the concept. So this is something I've really pursued avidly in the interval, showing the importance of these other compounds in cannabis that contribute to the overall health benefits.
And obviously, you for those who have followed your work over the years, they will obviously know of your previous experience as director of research and development of the International Cannabis and Cannabinoids Institute here in Europe. From your kind of extensive background in research with the entourage effect, why do you think it's been so difficult to measure? Why is some of the evidence out there contradictory? And you talked about that validation process every 2 years.
Well, first, we have to overcome a lot of stigma attached to cannabis. Also, we're dealing with a situation which for decades, 4 decades or more, the main funder of medical research on cannabis has been the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And really, they had focused on the idea that the pharmacology of cannabis pertained to THC, and really were ignoring the other effects. So that is one stigma that we've had to overcome. Additionally, we're dealing with subjective effects in humans. Until recently, it's been extremely difficult to do any kind of controlled, randomized controlled trials with cannabis in my country. And in other countries, it's fallen often to private companies, which haven't always been interested in meeting the highest standards of medical proof. But I can say this, anyone who's had the experience of using pure THC, such as in the drug Medicinal, and has used cannabis, appreciates the difference between these. It is clear to anyone that's undergone this kind of experience that there's a world of difference between pure THC and the effects and the variety of effects that can happen with cannabis of different chemical varieties or chemovars. Over the ensuing time, again, there's been a great deal of evidence that has accrued both through animal studies, lab studies, and some human studies to show these important differences in therapeutic effects.
In terms of some of those therapeutic effects then in relation to the entourage effect, we often hear about the potential for our health and wellness with this amazing discovery. So can you just kind of summarize what that potential might look like, the potential for our general kind of wellness, where we might actually be able to tap into something here with the entourage effect that previously people weren't open to?
Sure. So on its own, THC is a very difficult drug to tolerate. Unlike cannabis, which is often associated with euphoric effects, THC tends to be very disorienting and even dysphoric, makes people unhappy. People who take it feel quite scattered. So I've called this Taming THC, and that was the title of a 2011 article where I offered what we knew at that time to support this concept that THC is greatly enhanced by the presence of other compounds in cannabis that can do two things. One, boost therapeutic effects. For instance, we know that CBD with THC contributes to anti-inflammatory and analgesic, pain-reducing effects. Also, CBD will reduce the side effect profile of THC, reducing anxiety, reducing rapid heart rate, panic, and other symptoms. Similarly, the terpenoids, the aromatic components of cannabis, can go a long way to increasing this therapeutic index, which means allowing a higher dose of THC to be tolerated and getting better effects on whatever is being treated.
So you're talking really about general kind of quality of life management then, in terms of helping someone to get on with their life and maybe go back to work pain-free, while also having some sort of a positive effect on their stress management levels and anxiety management and all of these amazing things that once you kind of crack the code on them can really have a positive impact on things like sleep, which helps you get on better in your day, and all of these amazing things that are linked here. Do you think we can see a measurable difference between someone treating their medical condition, for example, in this case MS, with cannabinoid isolate compared to full spectrum? And maybe if you can just go into that a little bit, I suppose the differences between using a full spectrum cannabinoid product compared to an isolated product.
Yes, absolutely. So for example, there was a study not in MS, but in cancer pain that was done in the UK about 2005, published a few years later, in which it was shown that a THC predominant extract was not better than placebo in treating cancer pain over the course of 2 weeks. But when CBD was present, so there's a CBD extract with a THC extract, it was clearly statistically significantly better in terms of pain control. But that is the real power of cannabis. Let's be honest, there are very few things that cannabis cures. There are many things that it treats. And the reason is because of its versatility. It is tying into the endocannabinoid system, which is the master homeostatic regulator of physiology. Let's break that down. So the endocannabinoid system is the thing that regulates how our bodies work, whether it be emotions, digestion, almost any function that you can consider is affected by this system. Because THC and other components of cannabis modulate this system, it's easy to understand how this could have wide applicability to a variety of conditions. Plus, when we're dealing with chronic disease, it's not just a matter of treating one symptom, as most synthetic drugs are designed to do. Rather, I like to think of it in terms of a more holistic thing, where we're treating the totality of the patient's condition. So someone who has MS, they're dealing with multiple problems, often spasticity, pain, sleeplessness, worry related to that. In cannabis, we have a material that directly treats spasticity, and that's proven through randomized controlled trials. Almost invariably helps with sleep disturbance, limiting that. Also affects the pain, and it treats pain in a way that's quite distinct from the opioids. The opioids reduce pain, but introduce a lot of side effects of their own, nausea, risk of addiction, etc. With cannabinoids, it's quite different. Their real efficacy is in treating the affective component of pain. What patients will say is, I still feel the pain, but it does not bother me the same way. I can function, I can regain my life. And this is really the goal of treatment. No drug is going to be successful unless patients see the benefit of it. And so treating pain is not just pain reduction, but again, being able to cope and deal with life.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, maybe go back to work if your pain was, forcing you out of work, or go back to education or whatever it might be that you want to get on with. It's truly amazing. And obviously you mentioned the cancer study, and you mentioned MS as well. But on a more kind of everyday kind of scale, in terms of consumer cannabinoids, and I suppose your CBD that you can pick up, from your online retailers or your health supplement shops. If we can maybe just talk to you a little bit about the difference between isolate products and full spectrum products in that respect, in your kind of everyday CBD products. Is there a big difference there?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, most CBD isolates are produced in a rather synthetic fashion. Often they're extracted from hemp refuse. So this would be the material that is collected after cannabis is used for something else, even making fiber. And then it's one molecule alone. Now, CBD, cannabidiol, is an extremely versatile medicine. It has about 30 mechanisms of action, and all of them tend to be things that are good. Really has a very low side effect profile. That's the good part. However, CBD is not very potent as compared to THC. What that means medically is you need a higher number of milligrams to exert an effect. Most isolates that are out there on the market are low milligram preparations, and we can't say that they won't be helpful to an individual. That remains to be seen. But the likelihood of them really being truly helpful as compared to an extract that has other components in meaningful amounts is quite limited. Obviously, I'm a strong believer in the benefits of the entourage, because these things really do work together. And again, hearkening back to 1999, it's clear that many plants are better medicines than single compounds derived from them. And I can give another example, that being ginkgo biloba, which is used to treat dementia, memory difficulties, among other things. In France, they had marketed a single compound derived from ginkgo to treat septic shock. It had some efficacy, but it was found that it was not in any way better than the whole plant extract. There are many other examples from other botanicals, medicines derived from plants, but the controversy remains about cannabis. Fortunately, we're now doing studies in humans in a randomized controlled fashion where we can demonstrate this. There was a poster, and this will be pending publication, earlier this year with Ryan Vondre and colleagues at Johns Hopkins. We used different doses of THC with limonene, which is the scent one finds in citrus, and we're able to show a dose response effect of limonene to reduce anxiety induced by THC. So this will be a clear demonstration of the synergy of ingredients and justification for the entourage effect. And we have a series of other experiments to show other combinations. So what we're trying to do is sort of a deconstruction, reconstruction. Now, it's true to say that limonene plus THC is not the same as cannabis, but because there can be so many components in a plant-based medicine, scientifically, it makes sense to dissect it a little bit to its simplest level of comparison to try and show some valid support for the entourage effect.
Yeah, and I think what you were just talking about there just kind of alludes to the fact that there are so many components that we're dealing with here. There must be an endless list for someone like yourself in terms of what you can mix and match and pick and mix with and experiment with in that respect to see what works well together. So it must be an incredibly exciting field to be in.
It is. It's also endless. I've been at this for 25 years, and although we know a tremendous amount, there really is no limit to what could be achieved, considering that there are 150 or more cannabinoids that the plant makes, and so far about 200 different terpenoids have been found in cannabis, not all at the same time. But yeah, there are endless combinations. But we know certain therapeutic attributes of various of the components. And so it is possible today to make rational combinations with an eye towards targeting specific symptoms.
Amazing. We look forward to seeing what comes next. I wonder if I can ask you a question about kind of artificially producing the entourage effect now, because this is something that has come up in recent kind of years, I suppose. And is it possible to synthesize and combine cannabinoids and different components in a lab setting to artificially create this effect that we're all achieving, that we're all desiring to achieve, I should say? Or does it truly need to be whole plant derived in order to be successful?
Right. So the answer is yes. You could make these things synthetically with yeast or with E. coli. I tend to think that nature does it better, and that, in an ideal world, we would selectively breed cannabis to have the exact proportions and components that we want. Now, that takes time, money, and effort. Not everybody's ready to go that way. I do believe in the superiority of botanicals. What can make sense is combining different extracts, and this is perfectly allowable through the regulators. For example, Sativex, cannabis-based medicine, which is approved in 30 countries for spasticity and MS, is actually a combination of two extracts, a THC predominant extract and a CBD predominant extract, because when you use those, you can get higher concentrations in the individual plant. That is perfectly allowed, whether it be by the US Food and Drug Administration, the European Medicines Agency, or whoever. So that's recognized as a unitary formulation. Now, if on the other hand, one were making cannabinoids from different species of yeast or E. coli, that is considered a combination and requires testing of individual components and the ones together. So for toxicology studies and everything else, you've vastly increased the work and the costs associated with it. Additionally, when these things are made synthetically, we can't guarantee that they're going to be pure. Almost invariably, they will not be. And the impurities can be a real issue. For example, synthetic THC as Marinol is only 95% THC. So far, to my knowledge, the company hasn't been required to say what the rest is. And that may or may not be a problem, but certainly it can be. In relation to this, there's been a profusion of products, at least in the US, like Delta 8 THC made synthetically from cannabidiol. But invariably, in these products, there are impurities.
Mm.
other cannabinoids and what have you. And these are unknown at best and potentially dangerous at worst. However, with the plant, we know that there are thousands of years of human use that point to relative safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally untrue to say that cannabis has no side effects, but we know exactly what they are, and we really know how to avoid those through judicious dosing. So that's a very different situation from a lab experiment that may or may not have the level of purity that consumers really should have at their disposal.
So if you had the choice between choosing from two different oils, you would go for a naturally founded full spectrum kind of product?
Yes, personally, always.
Yeah,
Yes.
good to know. And it just rings true to so many other aspects of what we put into our bodies, from the whole plant messaging to whole food messaging. It really does kind of come into synergy with all of that, I think. So we talked about CBD, we've talked about THC, but I think it's also really important to shine a light on terpenes and flavonoids as well, which are also key components here. So, can we talk a little bit about how they fit into the entourage effect, and how they work with the cannabinoids that we're trying to get, and is it possible to reproduce these in a lab, or are you again looking at natural as best?
Natural is best. What is sometimes done is, if we don't have cannabis-based terpenoids at our disposal, they could come from other plants. For example, linalool is a highly desirable component for its anti-anxiety effects without addiction. However, linalool isn't so commonly found in different chemovars of cannabis. So some companies will use linalool from lavender, the most common source. Scientifically, this is rational. However, to develop a pharmaceutical from it, again, it would all need to be cannabis derived. And so again, some companies are making efforts now to extract terpenoids from cannabis so that they can be utilized in these rational combinations.
And in terms of the benefits that things like flavonoids and terpenes can give to the entourage effect, would you
Right.
mind telling us a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. So the terpenoids are produced by the plant for ecological reasons, often as defense compounds. So to either attract good bugs, to repel bad bugs. They can be anti-inflammatory for the plant, antibiotic for the plant. Through happy accident of nature, these exert effects physiologically on us as well. So things that are good for the plant can also be therapeutic for us. So very briefly, to give a few examples, limonene, as mentioned, can have anti-anxiety and especially antidepressant effects. Linalool is very good for anxiety. Myrcene is sedating, particularly in addition to THC, and that can be good for sleep. It's also anti-inflammatory and analgesic. Caryophyllene is anti-inflammatory. It works on the CB2 receptor, not the CB1 receptor, where THC is psychoactive. So it can produce analgesic and anti-inflammatory effects without producing intoxication. So these are a few. One more I should mention: alpha-pinene. THC is famous or infamous for producing short-term memory impairment. That can be reduced or eliminated if alpha-pinene is present. What it is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter memory molecule in the brain. So if we help prevent its breakdown, we enhance memory. And so people will not be losing their train of thought while they're trying to study or work, as could happen with a high THC preparation that didn't have limonene in it. With the flavonoids in cannabis, we're really just beginning to learn. There was a compound that was isolated in the UK from cannabis about 30 years ago called canflavin. And this is proving to be very useful. Flavonoids are used by the plant as anti-inflammatories. In humans, these can contribute to anti-inflammatory effects, again, pain-relieving effects, also prevention or treatment of cancer. When people have a lot of flavonoids in their diet, which would come from other plants, it's associated with things like longevity, freedom from pain, hopefully freedom from cancer. So this is a very promising area as well. And none of the flavonoids that I'm aware of to date are psychoactive. So unlike the controversy attached to THC, we don't need to be worried that these are going to contribute to any level of impairment with combination with THC.
Amazing. That sounds really promising. So what, in your kind of, I suppose, opinion, is the best approach to studying the entourage effect in our existing R&D or clinical model? Do we need some sort of paradigm shift in terms of our approach to be able to study this, or, you know, where do you see this going?
Well, we have to first eliminate the roadblocks to research, which remain considerable in my country and elsewhere. Apart from political barriers, there are also financial ones. Mm-hmm. We have hundreds, maybe thousands of cannabis companies at this point. And unfortunately, most are engaging at most in what's called observational research, meaning we have this product, we'll give it to a bunch of people and ask how they did. Well, that may be convincing up to a certain level, but in the scientific community, it counts for almost nothing. And for regulators, those that approve pharmaceuticals, it's meaningless. Mm-hmm. So until or unless we have better funding for biomedical research and the barriers to this kind of research come down, any progress that we make is going to be incremental at best.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long, slow process.
Yeah, and it will continue to fight the good fight, I imagine. So just to bring things to an end, are you hopeful about what the next few years will bring, what the next decade might bring in terms of studying the entourage effect?
Well, it'll be exciting, but with a proviso that we're allowed to do the work. You know, again, I've been at this for 25 years, and if I weren't so stubborn, I would have given up long ago. But yeah, I'm very optimistic about what the future may mean for cannabis therapeutics, and we need for the shackles to come off.
Well, here's hoping. Well, Dr. Ethan Russo, on behalf of the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis here in the UK and the Cannabinoid Journal and podcast, thank you so much for giving us your time today. And we look forward to coming back to you in the future to talk about all of these promising prospects that we've covered today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.